Hey guys, so I recently published an essay on my website called The False Allure of Reddit. And I was writing this essay specifically to analyze some of the unique aspects of a website like Reddit, the mechanisms for the Reddit karma economy, and how that can be manipulated and abused to push certain opinions in certain directions, and the general fact that the average person, user, or opinion you might see on a site like Reddit and its associated subreddits aren't necessarily reflective of the average person in reality. It's published now. I'll link it and you can go to the site and check it out if you're curious. But in writing this essay, I thought to myself, you know what? A lot of these elements and a lot of these Reddit characteristics that I'm arguing against aren't necessarily exclusive to Reddit itself. Actually, these are characteristics that are shared by most popular social media platforms in 2024. So, the idea I had was to make a video to expand on some of those characteristics and why that is the case for social media in general. That the stuff you see when you're scrolling or even watching videos or reading posts aren't necessarily reflective. They're not indicative of what people believe and think on average in the real world. And so this might all sound pretty obvious to a lot of you people, but realistically, I'm not sure if that fact is as obvious as it should be in this day and age. I think that we're actually gravitating towards a world, a system, a society where the information we're being fed, the information we're consuming, is coming almost explicitly and exclusively from social media platforms. And there's always the argument to be had of, well, we have that much more technology, we have that much more access to information. Is it really such a bad thing that we are utilizing it to this degree? And I would say no, not necessarily, but it depends how you're utilizing these apps and these technologies. Because to be honest, if you do utilize them properly, efficiently, responsibly, they can be an extension of yourself. You can not only have a tool that gives you immediate access to just about all of the information that is collectively known and has been recorded throughout history, and you can not only learn from those things but integrate them into your own knowledge base to just become a overall more aware person. And it's not like you have a mandate or a responsibility to do that when you use social media. These are entertainment platforms after all, but there is a threshold, there's a line, as ambiguous as it may be, that can be crossed in which you are probably not using these platforms responsibly. And I think you can deduce this just from looking around, going on the platform, and observing how other people are using it. So, like I said, this essay was originally intended to be, and it is specifically about Reddit.com itself. But there are plenty of other toxic, addictive platforms out there that can suck you into just as deep of a rabbit hole as sites like Reddit. So we are not going to discriminate. We are going to criticize all of them. And I think another big site that is not only growing, but is starting to become a lens for how people view the world is X, formerly known as Twitter. And there's a lot of stuff that went down with X, the buyout from Elon Musk, and there's might be good reason to get excited over the ownership change there, depending on where your values lie. Sure, I can get on board with that, but that doesn't change, that doesn't negate the negative potential that can arise when you are addicted to these apps, you are addicted to these platforms like X. And we've touched on this specific concept in the last few videos that I've done in some way, but X itself, as an example, is really, really good, is really, really effective at reinforcing the binary mindset. And by the binary mindset, we mean looking at the world, looking at power imbalances, looking at partisan politics, looking at your friends and family, looking at just about everything through this lens of a binary separation. And that can be red, blue, oppressor, oppressed, right, wrong. It can be just about anything. But There is something innate in us as humans, something tribal, that when we have the opportunity to categorize, to scapegoat, and then to fall neatly on one side or the other, we like to do that because it's easy. It paints a clearer picture for us and the landscape of the ideas we're talking about and the opponents, the supposed opponents to these ideas. And when you have boiled it down to a one side versus another side type of engagement, well, people are going to get sucked into that and they're going to start viewing the whole world as this one side versus another side. And I don't believe that that is a good thing. I actually think that's a really dangerous thing to become involved in. And it's something that will have consequences for your personal life if you're not careful and you do not tread with caution. Because this is something that I'm sure just about everyone watching can point out and see, or at least observe having happened around them. Like a person, a group of people that they become so sucked into. It can be a narrative. It can be like an echo chamber they're following within these apps. But become so immersed that they have a hard time seeing outside of that lens they've been living under for so long. And that's the danger. And the risk that makes me very sad and very worried is the potential for this type of thinking, this type of mindset to leak into relationships and friendships, because that's what's happening. People get so sucked into their tribal grouping, their tribal identity, that when they see another person in a real life or they're interacting with another person in real life, they automatically associate that person with the entire other side, the entire what they might consider the enemy or the opposition. And if you hear an opinion or a perspective that you associate with that other side, what'll happen is you just associate that person with all of the other ideas you are against because of the way you're seeing reality and because you're thinking in this binary way, this zeros and ones fashion. And if you are so wrapped up into this to the point where it is the most important thing in your life and you feel like you have a divine mandate to be expressing your political or cultural opinions in a way that is less so for the sake of intellectual engagement or exploring your curiosity, but more so for the sake of projecting your views out onto the rest of the world, well, you should probably have a really, really good reason for doing that. Because if that's you and you don't think you're being affected by this behavior in some way, shape, or form, you're probably not thinking hard enough, because obviously these things have real consequences and you are seeing them play out just within how the normal discourse has shifted in society today. And it's a little bit sad. It's a little bit demoralizing to see this unfold on such a large scale. But if there's a message that I can send out, if there's something that I can share with anyone as a piece of advice or even just a plea of desperation, it would be, do not let politics get in the way of or affect your personal relationships. Because ideally, in a perfect world, you and the person you disagree with are going to be mature and secure enough in your beliefs and your opinions that you can have these discussions, you can have disagreements, you can have even a fiery debate, so to speak, without letting it affect your personal view of that person, or at least your personal view of that person in a detrimental way. And I used to think that when possible, you should avoid confrontational conversations with people, because it's just going to start fights. It's just going to create problems. It's just going to stir the pot. And what is the real point in doing that? But I do think there is a line. There's a fine line, and there's a balance to pointing out bad ideas and misguided ideas when they are expressed to you in a matter of fact way. And maybe there are times when you just keep your mouth shut, you don't say anything. But I feel like what we have to figure out is how to be able to re-engage these conversations without taking it so personally. And I think this ties back into the tribal mindset that we've been talking about, is when you do identify with these groups as though they are part of your core identity, you are going to get offended when someone criticizes your ideas, because you're going to perceive it as them criticizing you and your identity. But if you have a approach where you're more detached from, for example, political beliefs, not detached in a way where you don't have a strong opinion, but detached in a way where you will not die on a hill because your opinions are now integrated with your ego. It doesn't have to be the case. You can still have firm conviction and engage other people who think differently with an open mind. And that should be the goal. That should be the best case scenario. And we're seeing these conversations unfold all over the place. And the goal of any conversation where two people disagree, if they're engaging it honestly, they don't have to compromise. They don't have to change their stance on the issue. But that little bit of perspective from the outside, from someone that they don't necessarily think the same as, it should necessarily improve their own perspective by either reinforcing what they thought or making them rethink what they thought. And this should be a cycle that is perpetually occurring. Like, it should never stop. This is the marketplace of ideas, this is the town square, and this is how compromise is made. But there are forces right now, not just in America, but across the world, that are intentionally designed to polarize people. And if we're not aware of this, if we're not stepping outside of this bubble that is being blown around us, that is being created around us, then we are going to become victims. We're going to become victims of a political, a tribal war. There's always been politics, there's always been disagreement over power. But if it gets to the point now where we are so invested in our politics that we're not even able to have friends that think differently than we do, that's a problem. And that's my message with this article and with this video. And I talk about X, I talk about Reddit, but the reality is that there's no boundary I'm putting on these platforms. It just comes down to the type of spaces that you are living within, either online or in person. And spaces are good, ritual is good, and it's good to have groups. It's good to have people that you do agree with and that you can trust to some degree. But I don't think this is going to stop from the top down. I don't think these behemoth corporations, these massive media companies, are going to take the liberty of saying, you know what? Things are getting a little bit too polarized. Maybe we'll switch up the algorithm a little bit to make everyone happier. I don't think they're going to do that. I think they're going to optimize engagement as much as possible, and they don't really care one way or another. Actually, they might care one way what people end up thinking at the end of the day. But the point is, they're not going to suddenly become this altruistic entity that starts designing an algorithm around us all becoming friends again. That's not going to happen. So the only way it's going to work, the only way things are going to change, is if on the individual level we look at ourselves, we assess how we are engaging these platforms, and we determine whether or not that's something that's healthy, something that we should continue to do, or something that we should adjust our behavior around. And that doesn't mean you have to delete all your apps. But if you are a person that has fallen into this trap, because I believe we all have at some point in our lives, that's the moment when you might want to do a little bit of introspection and say, what is this app doing for me? What am I getting out of this app? And am I getting more out of this app or this website than the clicks and the consumption that I am feeding right back into it? Is that a healthy balance? Am I maybe being exploited in some way to continue engaging on these platforms with these anonymous people I do not know in real life? Maybe not, but maybe. I'm sure for a lot of people the answer would be yes. So that's all I'm trying to get you to think about. How are you approaching these apps? At the end of the day, are they doing you a service or are they doing you a disservice? And I'm not perfect. I do the same stuff, but just in writing this article and thinking about these things a little bit, these facts have become a little bit clear to me. So, in this moment of clarity, I thought I would reflect and explain why these things aren't always necessarily good. So, I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. But even with just what I'm seeing on this channel, even what I'm seeing on the small social media circles around me, that's exactly what's happening. People are falling into this tribal mindset, and it's either we agree or we disagree. And if we disagree, there's no common ground. You are the enemy, and we got to figure that out. So